21. Esoteric alchemy. Cyrus noticed the problem the moment he held the book. Its pages were neither paper nor parchment. The words and diagrams weren't written or drawn, but seemed to have been branded into the surface with metal. The book was very thin, only 21 pages, but the page numbers in the corners weren't sequential. Instead, every 7 pages a single word appeared. 7. It repeated 3 times. In the wizarding world, everyone knew 7 was a magical number. Hogwarts even taught a course that touched on its significance, and Lord Voldemort had a well-known obsession with it. But in alchemy, 3 was sacred as well. As for the book's content, Cyrus couldn't make head or tail of it. Even the knowledge of a 5th-year Tom Riddle looked superficial next to what this manuscript hinted at. After all, Nicholas Flamel, guided by prophetic dreams, had spent 28 years trying to unravel its mysteries. Cyrus closed the Book of Jewish Abraham and glanced around. There was another book nearby, the manuscript by Nicholas Flamel, the Book of Hieroglyphs. This one was thick. Cyrus flipped through it casually, and an already opened letter slid out and fluttered onto the floor. To Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Dear Albus, after a very long time, more than 6 centuries, Perenelle and I have dragged our tattered bodies through yet another part of this adventure called life. Facing death no longer frightens us. We both think that when the world learns of our passing, they will mourn and covet our fortune. But not you, Albus. We have always believed death to be simply another adventure, and Perenelle and I have lingered in this one for far too long. Before we leave, I give you the 2 most important books of my life as a token of my friendship. You are 500 years my junior, yet your wisdom is no less than my own. By the way, I have left the rest of my wealth to Beauxbaton. I hope that does not offend you. I know, of course, that you have always had no use for such things. I cannot claim to have fully understood the mysteries of the Book of Jewish Abraham. This volume, received in a dream, contains true wisdom and truth, though it is only a few pages. Please keep it safe, and if fate allows you to unravel its secrets, it would please me greatly. We both know, however, how difficult that task is. When we first met, and later when we worked closely together exploring the secrets of magic and alchemy, you read this book countless times without making progress. Since it found me by prophecy, I am willing to believe that fate may yet take it where it belongs. Because of Lord Voldemort, I have decided to entrust the Philosopher's Stone to you. Perhaps that, too, is part of revelation. That said, Perenelle and I still have some elixir of life left, so do not worry. P.S. I believe we shall meet again very soon. Cyrus folded the letter and understood at last. Someone like Riddle, terrified of death, would have jumped at the chance to claim a book like this if he had known it existed, but he had no memory of it. Dumbledore had only placed these books in the restricted section the previous year. The envelope was opened. Dumbledore had read Flamel's letter and knew these volumes were his gifts. Yet Dumbledore had not kept them for himself. He had put them on the restricted section shelves, waiting for the revelation of fate that Flamel mentioned. Cyrus felt a small, narcissistic thrill. Could that revelation be meant for him? Regardless, he had no intention of letting the books go. If he could truly recreate the Philosopher's Stone, it would be invaluable to his own resurrection. Even a flawed product that restored vitality in part would lessen Ginny's suffering. He began to flip through the 2 books methodically and selected several other works on alchemy for cross-reference. Tom Riddle, even then, had been skilled in alchemy. He had obtained an advanced wizarding certificate with excellent marks and had interned at Borgin and Burke's after graduation. But that was the Tom Riddle who had graduated, not the 5th-year student occupying these memories now. One title caught his eye, Islamic Alchemy and the Kabbalah's Tree of Life. It mentioned a wizard named Hohenheim, another figure rumored to have possessed the Philosopher's Stone. Whether that was true remained uncertain. Cyrus was glad he was in a memory state, otherwise he could never have absorbed so many texts so quickly. The diary he inhabited was, in some ways, another priceless pensieve. Anything he read could be recorded as images in its memory space. He could capture the contents now and analyze them later. It didn't shorten the actual time needed to learn, but it made the process safer. The ancient Egyptian text, the Emerald Tablet, offered another angle. He read, To create the miracle of the one thing, know that what is above is the same as what is below, and what is below is no different from what is above. What, he wondered, was the one thing? Near the emerald tablet lay the Book of Thoth, a text closely linked to the tablet. Cyrus opened it too. He wasn't trying to understand everything fully. He was skimming, deciding which books were worth recording and which could be set aside. He read, scanned, and cataloged, letting the images lodge into the diary's memory. Time slipped away. He immersed himself until a screaming crow from a rooster outside the castle jolted him back to the present. It was almost dawn. I need to get back, he thought. I meant to look for dangerous dark arts tomes to increase my power, and instead, I spent the whole night on alchemy. He shook his head, but he wasn't regretful. Tired or not, he felt oddly exhilarated. Once he returned the body to Ginny, he would have the privacy and time to sort through the memories and analyze what he'd recorded. He hurried down the Hogwarts corridors. Outside, the sky was still dark, but the east had begun to pale with the coming dawn. He smiled wryly at a small, practical thought. He still needed to deal with the roosters. He had already killed one, but he hadn't dared to do them all at once. Too conspicuous. With the first light touching the castle stones, Cyrus quickened his pace toward the place he would have to return to Ginny, the books, mysteries fresh in his mind, and the promise of the Philosopher's Stone burning quietly at the back of his plans. 22. Quidditch Match. At night these days, Cyrus would occasionally slip into the restricted section while occupying Ginny's body. Besides alchemy, he read many forbidden tomes: the Grimoire of the Red Dragon, the Grimoire of Solomon, the Grimoire of Raziel, Compendium of Dark Spells, and others. Some of them Riddle had already perused, others he had never had the time to study himself. Riddle's years at Hogwarts had been too short, and the number of books he could read was limited. He had concentrated most of his efforts on the dark arts, but dangerous power wasn't confined to dark texts. Some books that weren't strictly dark arts were kept in the restricted section because of how perilous their contents were. Lately, Cyrus had been absorbed in the theory and experiment of fantastical magus transformation, the birth of the quintuped. Although magical creatures have always been enslaved, he read, closing the book and letting his mind sink into memory, their magical power is astonishing. If I can achieve a transformation of a magical creature, my strength would grow immensely. Ah, Ginny yawned, eyes heavy with sleep, feeling as if her head were 10 times heavier than a quaffle. Good morning, Ginny. Are you all right? Colin, camera swinging from his neck, spotted her at once and hurried over. You look terrible. You look like you haven't slept in days. Click, he raised his camera and snapped a picture. The print slid out, showing a small girl with deep dark circles under her eyes. Colin, blissfully unaware of any impertinence, grinned. Honestly, I never thought wizards could suffer from sleep deprivation. You look like you're about to collapse. Your dark circles. His unending chatter annoyed Ginny. He'd even taken an ugly photo of her. Shut up, Colin. Give me that. No way. I'm sending this home to my brother. He can't wait for my photos from Hogwarts. Colin flashed a grin, then grew solicitous. Do you want to go rest? You look so pale, I'm worried you might die in front of my camera. Ginny stared. She was too tired to argue, so she asked listlessly, What class do we have today? No class today. You really need rest. Don't you remember? Today's the Quidditch match, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, Colin announced. I'm planning to sneak onto the pitch to capture the moment Harry wins. By the way, how's your relationship with Harry? Your brother and he are close, right? Colin's mouth was like a machine gun, but Ginny only heard the first 5 words. No class today. No class. I'm going back to sleep. You're not going to watch? Colin sounded astonished. He assumed every witch and wizard loved Quidditch. Quidditch? Ginny's steps faltered. She did like Quidditch. She had always been jealous watching her brothers play at home, even though they rarely included her. But she was so sleepy. Then an idea struck her. I can ask Mr. Riddle to record it in the diary. All right, I'll go to sleep and watch it later. What? Nothing. You go ahead. I'll catch up and watch later. Ginny hurried back to the dormitory and pulled out her diary. Mr. Riddle, there's a Quidditch match today and I don't want to miss it, but I'm exhausted. Can you record the match in the diary, like when we talk face to face? The word Quidditch snagged Cyrus's attention. If he remembered correctly, in the original events, this match was followed by the second person being attacked by the basilisk, Colin Creevey, the first year who never stopped pestering Harry. Cyrus knew he had to act. "Of course, I'll make it an authentic, detailed account of the match," he wrote. "Great, then I'll sleep." Ginny hadn't even finished the sentence before she fell asleep. Cyrus, inside Ginny's body, felt a similar wariness. During the recent flu, he'd stocked some restorative potions. One of those did more for him than coffee ever could, though it left his head buzzing. He drank it anyway. "Hello, Ginny? You all right?" Hermione greeted warmly on the pitch. Their friendship was good. Hermione always thought Ginny looked fragile and a little ill. "You should rest more." "Just didn't sleep well. Stayed up reading," Cyrus answered, keeping his voice Ginny's. Hermione scolded gently and then shot a glare at Ron. "You should learn from her. That's why she can reverse older students' spells and not get into trouble like you do." "Are you mad? My wand's broken," Ron protested indignantly from where he sat, surprised to be singled out. Hermione let it go. Encouragement from her rarely did much anyway, and their attention turned to the match. Gryffindor started badly. "The team doesn't look good," Ron fretted. "Malfoy donated Nimbus 2001s to Slytherin, and Gryffindor's brooms are still comets, not even Comet 7s. Even Harry's Nimbus 2000 seemed second-rate beside Malfoy's sleek black broom, which gleamed like a sports car. The weather was muggy, and rain began to fall. The scoreboard read 0-60 in Slytherin's favor. Cyrus wasn't expert in Quidditch, but he knew the basics. A quaffle through a hoop scored 10 points, the golden snitch was worth 150, and bludgers scored nothing but aimed to knock players off course. One bludger, however, was behaving oddly. "I think I saw this plot last year," Ron muttered, staring. "Someone tampered with that bludger." Hermione leapt up. The bludger had stopped attacking the other players and seemed to be following Harry, as if it had eyes of its own. The Weasley twins, the beaters, were forced to stay dangerously close to Harry, continually fending it off. Hermione's gaze flicked instinctively to Snape, then to Lockhart, remembering the chaos of last semester. Gorgeous Lockhart? It made no sense. She searched the stands and pitch for any sign of someone casting a spell, but found no one. 23. Healer Lockhart. Cyrus's gaze swept across the professor's table. Every teacher, even Dumbledore, watched with bated breath, yet none of them moved. It was obvious to anyone that the bludger was behaving strangely, but the professors stood frozen, like a group of stunned onlookers. "Aren't they going to do something?" Cyrus asked. Ron looked pale, but answered, "They can't. Official Quidditch matches are full of oddities. If the referees or professors interfered every time something unusual happened, the match couldn't go on. Unless someone is in true mortal danger, no one steps in." "But what about Harry? Couldn't they check the bludger?" Hermione asked anxiously. "Of course not," Ron said. "What if the bludger was fine? They'd be disqualified." Before the match, Wood told Harry, "Either catch the snitch or die on the pitch." Ron's face went ashen. "We need to think of something." Hermione scanned the stands. "I can't find who's casting a spell," she admitted. Cyrus knew perfectly well who was behind it, but he had no intention of acting. His eyes lingered on another part of the stadium. Lucius Malfoy, the main sponsor of the Slytherin team, had come to watch, partly for Draco, partly in the hope that the Dark Lord's diary might hold the key to opening the Chamber of Secrets. Cyrus wondered whether Lucius would behave as he had in the original story. Had Riddle contacted him? Had he been told to make a move to get Dumbledore expelled? If so, Cyrus's plan might not be simple to execute. Right now, Lucius was wholly absorbed in watching Draco play. Despite his usual strictness, Lucius's pride in Draco showed. He loved his son in his own way. Must be a Malfoy first, Cyrus thought, and the plan took shape. If he had to, he would use the Malfoy name to get Lucius to act. Not yet, though. A sudden, enormous cheer snapped Cyrus back to the present. Gryffindor students were leaping from their seats. Hermione and Ron grabbed Cyrus and pulled him into the surge toward the pitch. Others flooded forward too. Harry had won the match in a near-tragic, heroic way. Cyrus watched Harry collapse, looking as if he might faint. His arm looked horribly twisted. "Is he all right?" someone cried. "Hard to say," Ron answered. "That blasted bludger hit his right arm. I think it fractured, then he crashed into Malfoy. He still managed to catch the snitch, but his arm's worse now. They closed around Harry. Then a bright, confident voice cut through the crowd. Make way! Let me see him! Gilderoy Lockhart pushed through, smiling as if he'd just stepped onto a stage. Broken arm? Leave it to me. I've had this happen 100 times. Hermione made room, but Harry flinched at the sight of him. Hearing Lockhart's voice seemed to rouse him from daze. He weakly protested, No, not you. Lockhart, oblivious to the refusal, announced loudly to the surrounding Gryffindors, Don't worry, Harry. I'll fix your arm. No, Harry repeated. Just take me to the hospital wing, please. Colin Creevey, the reporter, elbowed closer and started taking pictures, capturing Harry in his most helpless moment. Cyrus couldn't help thinking there was an irony in the boy who loved cameras being put in harm's way. Lie still, Harry, Lockhart said soothingly. It's a simple charm. I've done it countless times. Why can't I just go to the infirmary? Harry gritted out, glancing at Cyrus and thinking of Ginny. Ginny, who had once unraveled Ron's jinx in a way far more reliable than any of Lockhart's vaunted cures. Cyrus could have healed him in a heartbeat, but leaving Lockhart to perform the procedure served a different purpose. One Cyrus was not willing to abandon. Wood, muddy but smiling despite his injured seeker, said he really should go to the hospital. That catch was brilliant, Harry. Best I've ever seen. Through the tangle of bodies, Harry saw Fred and George forcing the still struggling bludger into its storage box. The bludger thudded and rattled as they slowed its resistance. Stand back, Lockhart announced, rolling up his emerald sleeve. Before Harry could protest further, Lockhart had his wand poised and a confident expression plastered on his face. A second later, he tapped Harry's arm. A strange, electricity-like sensation ran from Harry's shoulder to his fingertips, emptying the limb of feeling. He shut his eyes and turned away, too afraid to watch. Around him, a chorus of gasps rose. Colin's camera clicked frantically. When he opened his eyes, relief didn't come. The pain was gone, but so was the arm as he'd known it. It hung limply, and what emerged from his sleeve looked like a thick, fleshy rubber glove rather than a proper arm. He tried to move his fingers. There was no response. It wasn't a reset of bone. Lockhart had taken the bones out. Lockhart, flustered but trying to maintain his composure, hurried to cover it. Ah, yes, sometimes this happens. The important thing is he's not in pain. There. Now, Harry, off to the hospital wing, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger. Could you escort him? Madame Pomfrey will put him right. Harry stood up with his body leaning awkwardly to one side. He took a breath and stared down at his right arm. Boneless, floppy, and utterly useless. He fought the urge to puke. Around them, the crowd buzzed, stunned and confused. Lockhart smiled as if the cure had gone exactly as planned, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Harry's arm did not feel like an arm at all. Madame Pomfrey glared at him. I'm glad you came to the hospital wing, but I am very unhappy you didn't come straight to me. She held up the pathetic, lifeless arm, soft and flabby like Harry's undeveloped other arm. I can set bones in a second, but to make them grow back. Never again? Cyrus blurted. It can't get hard again. I mean the bone. What do you mean? What else could it be? Ron said, baffled. Of course she'll make it grow back, but it'll be very painful, and he'll have to stay here overnight. Madame Pomfrey said sternly as she tossed Harry a pair of pajamas, then shot Cyrus a sharp look. You little... What on earth were you thinking? The curtains around Harry's bed were drawn. Ron helped him into the pajamas while Hermione and Cyrus waited outside. Ron had to work to get the rubbery, boneless arm into the sleeve. How are you going to defend Lockhart now, Hermione? He called through the fabric as he pulled Harry's limp fingers out of the cuff one by one. If Harry'd wanted his bones taken out, he'd have asked for it himself. Everyone makes mistakes, Hermione said. And the arm doesn't hurt now, does it, Harry? It doesn't hurt, Harry said, though his eyes kept slipping to Cyrus. Even Cyrus looked at Hermione with a strange expression. Hermione, be sensible, he added quietly. If Madame Pomfrey couldn't fix this, his right hand would be crippled. Lockhart nearly did permanent damage. He had no business attempting something he wasn't qualified for, Hermione said sharply. The thought made her sad. Madame Pomfrey reappeared inside the curtain, holding a steaming bottle labeled Skelligro. This'll be an uncomfortable night. she warned as she poured a large, hot cup and handed it to Harry. Growing bones is painful. Seeing Harry's worried expression, Ron tried to change the subject. At least we won, thanks to you catching the snitch. Did you see Malfoy's face? He looked like he wanted to kill someone. I want to know what he did to that bludger, Hermione said angrily. They were already blaming Malfoy for the attacks. We'll add that to the list to ask him when we're disguised. I just hope Polyjuice Potion tastes better than this stuff. Harry's voice trailed off. His gaze had fixed on Cyrus. Polyjuice Potion? Cyrus said at the same time, with a casual note of doubt. Suddenly, they all realized Harry had said too much. Harry, you let it slip, Hermione hissed, clamping a pillow over his mouth. Ron lunged forward, panicking. You didn't hear anything, Colin. No, I mean, there's no way we could brew polyjuice. That's advanced potion making. The recipe's in the restricted section, and we'd need dozens of ingredients, some you can't get. He babbled, trying to cover. Ron, you've practically told them everything, Harry croaked, pushing the pillow away with his left hand. Ron went white. Don't tell Mum, please, he pleaded, half kneeling, half bowing, until Hermione snorted with awkward laughter. Of course I won't report you, Cyrus said, shaking their hands off with an indifferent shrug. That wouldn't help anyone, but... So you plan to use Polyjuice Potion to take the forms of Slytherins and then ask Malfoy whether he opened the Chamber of Secrets? Hermione finished, stunned. The three of them nodded. You know Polyjuice Potion, then? You know what it does? Hermione asked. I saw it in a book, Cyrus replied coolly. She'd read powerful potions before. She had grown used to answers no one else expected. If you don't mind, you can call me along when the time comes. You too, Ron started to say, about to refuse, when a noisy commotion erupted outside. The Gryffindor Quidditch team poured into the hospital wing, carrying food and drink, as if planning a celebration. Madame Pomfrey, furious, came sweeping out and drove them all away. This child needs rest. He has 33 bones to grow. Out, out! At the foot of the ward, Cyrus ran into Colin Creevey. The boy had tried to come in and had been forced back by the crowd. His small frame craned around the team, clutching a bunch of grapes he'd managed to hide from dinner. Don't look, Colin, Cyrus said in a voice that might have been helpful. Madame Pomfrey won't let anyone visit, but you could always try a secret visit, if you're brave. Colin's eyes widened. Cyrus left him there and walked away. Ginny was too weak. Cyrus planned to rest so as not to make her condition worse. There were still hours before Hogwarts' curfew. That night, Cyrus woke in the dark, winding corridors of the Chamber of Secrets. The giant serpent coiled around them. Its eyes possessed a terrible magic for anyone who met their gaze, but not to the one who controlled it. The second hunt begins, Cyrus said, climbing up onto the basilisk's scaled head. Close your eyes. This creature was not like ordinary snakes. It relied more on sight and sound than on heat, and it obeyed the voice that guided it. Cyrus's whisper slid down the basilisk's massive skull like a cold promise. Hogwarts at night was thin and silent. Avoiding Filch's patrols with careful turns, Cyrus rode the snake, gliding through the dark and heading toward the hospital wing. At the same time, Colin Creevey, cradling his stolen grapes and his beloved camera, tiptoed along the route Cyrus had mentioned. It was his first night excursion. He wanted to take pictures of anything strange. He walked whistling, turned a corner too quickly, and ran straight into something enormous. He fell, spilling grapes across the flagstones. What the? He started, then his voice died. Before him was a head the size of a cart, eyes closed, scales glistening in the torchlight. On that head crouched a pale girl, Ginny Weasley. Ginny, Colin whispered, bewildered. You're the heir of Slytherin? That's right, came Cyrus's voice, playful and small in the huge space. But unfortunately, no third party is meant to know. Colin scrambled for his camera, hands shaking. If his life ended for this, at least he'd gotten the shot. Click. Good night, little Gryffindor lion. 25. The question is not who, the question is how. Harry was jerked awake by a voice in his head and by a fresh, ripping pain in his arm. It felt as though thousands of tiny blades had been driven into his muscles. As the bone splinters knit, they forced through the flesh. The pain that Lockhart had briefly removed had come back, and worse than before. More than the pain, though, it was the voice in his head that unsettled him. He had almost forgotten it. and the sight of a small creature dabbing at his brow with a grimy sponge. "Get away!" Harry flailed instinctively, then stilled when he realized who the creature was. Dobby, the house elf, who had somehow made Harry miss the train and been the cause of that ministry warning, stood on the pillow, looking anxious. "Dobby warned Harry Potter many times," the elf said in a whine. "Ah, sir, why did you not heed Dobby's warnings? Harry Potter missed the train. Why did he not go home?" Harry's anger flared. "You did this. You put the barrier up so we couldn't get through. You nearly had Ron and me expelled." He glared. "You'd better scuttle away while my bones haven't finished mending, Dobby, or I'll strangle you." "Dobby is used to death threats," the elf answered calmly, though there was a plaintive look in his eyes that took some of the heat out of Harry's temper. "Dobby hears them 5 times a day at home." Harry's gaze dropped to the thing Dobby wore, a dirty pillowcase with a hole cut for a head. "Why are you wearing that?" he asked. "This, sir?" Dobby tugged at it. "It shows a house elf servitude, sir. Dobby can only be freed if Dobby's master gives him clothes. The people at home are careful, sir. They do not even give Dobby socks, for then Dobby would be free and would leave forever." Harry felt a stab of sympathy for a second, then it vanished as Dobby hurried on. Harry Potter must go home. Dobby thought his bludger would surely make— "Your bludger?" Harry cut in. Did you send that bludger to kill me?" "Not to kill you, sir. Not to kill," Dobby cried, horror written across his face. "Dobby wanted to save Harry Potter's life. Better to be hurt and sent home than to stay here, sir. Dobby only hoped Harry Potter would be slightly injured and then sent home." "Oh," Harry's tone was sharp. "So that's it. You didn't want to kill me. You wanted me sent home in pieces. Charming." "If only Harry Potter knew," Dobby went on, suddenly more solemn, "what he means to us, the small enslaved folk. Dobby remembers when he who must not be named was strongest. House elves were treated like vermin, sir. Many still treat Dobby so now." He dabbed his face on the pillowcase again. "Since Harry Potter lived, since the Dark Lord was broken, life has been better. Harry Potter is like a shining light after the dark. But now, terrible things may happen at Hogwarts again. Dobby cannot let Harry Potter stay. History might repeat itself. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Again." "So it exists?" Harry whispered. "And it was opened before? Who opened it last time?" "Ah, sir, please don't ask," the house elf stammered, his eyes huge in the gloom. "Someone here is plotting. Harry Potter must not be here when it happens. Go home, Harry Potter. Go home. It is too dangerous." "Who is it, Dobby? Who opened the chamber? Who opened it last time?" "Dobby cannot say, sir. Dobby cannot say. Dobby absolutely cannot say." The elf's voice rose to a terrified shriek. "Go home, Harry Potter. Go home." "I'm not going anywhere," Harry snapped. "One of my best friends is Muggle-born, and if the chamber really has been opened, she'll be the first. Harry Potter would risk his life for his friends." Dobby gushed in a mixture of sadness and admiration. "How noble, how brave, but he must save himself. Harry Potter must not." He froze mid-sentence. Both his bat-like ears quivered. Harry heard it too, footsteps in the corridor outside. "Dobby must go," the elf whispered, terrified. With a sudden pop, his fist unclenched and nothing was left on the pillow but a smudge of dirt. He vanished. Harry fell back exhausted, keeping his eyes on the ward door as the footsteps drew nearer. Dumbledore came into the room first, in a long wool dressing gown and a nightcap, carrying one end of something. Professor McGonagall followed, holding the other end. Together they placed it carefully on Harry's bed. "Fetch Madame Pomfrey," Dumbledore murmured, and McGonagall hurried out. Harry lay very still, pretending to sleep. He listened to hurried voices, to running footsteps, then McGonagall returned with Madame Pomfrey bundled into a jacket over her nightdress. A sharp intake of breath told Harry something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" Madame Pomfrey asked, leaning over the object. "Another attack," Dumbledore answered. McGonagall found him on the stairs. "He had a bunch of grapes on him," McGonagall said. "We think he was trying to sneak up to see Potter." Harry's stomach turned. He raised himself a little, careful and slow, and saw the thing laid on the bed in the moonlight. It was Colin Creevey, rigid and pale, his eyes open, hands outstretched, clutching his camera. "Petrified?" Madame Pomfrey breathed. "Yes," McGonagall said. "I shiver to think of it. If Professor Dumbledore hadn't come downstairs for hot chocolate, who knows what would have happened." They inspected Colin closely. Dumbledore reached forward and took the camera from the boy's stiff fingers. "Did he get a picture of the attacker?" McGonagall asked eagerly. Dumbledore did not answer. He pried open the back of the camera. A quick hiss of hot air escaped. Even 3 beds away, Harry could smell the acrid reek of burning plastic. "It's melted," Madame Pomfrey said, surprised. "Completely." "What does it mean, Albus?" McGonagall pressed. Dumbledore looked down at Colin and said quietly, "It means that the Chamber of Secrets has indeed been opened again." Madame Pomfrey covered her mouth with her hand. McGonagall stared at Dumbledore, bewilderment and fear in her face. "But Albus, you must know." "Who?" she whispered. Dumbledore's eyes lingered on Colin's frozen expression. "The question isn't who," he said slowly. "The question is how." Harry saw the confusion cross McGonagall's face in the dim light. Like him, she did not yet understand what Dumbledore meant. 26. Rescue in the opposite direction. How exactly did Ginny Weasley open the Chamber of Secrets? She couldn't possibly be the heir of Slytherin. Dumbledore sat in his office and turned the question over in his mind. When McGonagall had visited the hospital wing, she'd suggested he might already know who had opened the chamber. In truth, he did know, or at least he knew more than anyone else suspected. Dumbledore had briefly entertained the idea that Draco Malfoy might be responsible, misled by Ginny's panicked mistakes. But by the time of the second attack, the identity of the real culprit had already been revealed to him. As headmaster, Dumbledore had far too many sources inside the castle to be kept entirely in the dark, and his most reliable source wasn't even a living person. The portraits. Cyrus remembered how close he'd come to being undetected. He just petrified Colin when Dumbledore arrived moments later. Dumbledore might claim he'd only come downstairs for hot chocolate, but Cyrus had learned not to trust coincidences in a building where the paintings gossiped. The portraits weren't mere decorations. They had minds of their own and answered directly to Dumbledore. If he wanted information from around the castle, all he had to do was ask, or the portraits would volunteer details without being asked. Tom Riddle had never been seen by the portraits the first time he released the basilisk, because he operated from the lavatory and used the castle's pipes where the paintings had no sight. Cyrus had done the same on his first attempt and gone unobserved. The second time, however, the basilisk had been allowed to stalk the corridor, and that movement drew attention. "At least the chamber's location hasn't been revealed," Cyrus muttered. Whenever he entered the chamber, he cloaked himself with a disillusionment charm, and the lavatory had no portraits to betray him. He wasn't overly worried that Dumbledore now suspected something. Letting the headmaster believe he had the situation under control could only serve Cyrus's plan. Dumbledore would most likely conclude the trouble was the work of the old Tom Riddle, now harmless within a diary, and would be eager to see whether the boy from the prophecy, Harry Potter, could solve the mystery once more. Dumbledore's main priority would be student safety, not unraveling Cyrus's true nature. "A pity. The prophecy's irrelevant now," Cyrus chuckled softly. "The soul in that diary isn't Tom Riddle's anymore." That was the twist Dumbledore would never expect. If Dumbledore waited for Harry to repeat the trial, only to find the expected boss already gone, it would be entertaining. After petrifying Colin and returning to the castle, Cyrus went back to bed. Ginny's face did look a little better, still pale and a touch cool to the touch, signs that her life force was being drained, but he did not restore her to full strength. He washed, climbed under the covers, and slept as if nothing in the world had happened. Down in Gryffindor Tower, Hermione was on the sofa with a heavy book open, Advanced Potion Making. No, not that. A different one, titled Powerful Potions. "You're up early," she said when Cyrus entered the common room. Though Cyrus wasn't there, of course, the newcomer was one of the students. "It's rare to be able to borrow this book," Hermione added, closing it with a clap. "Ron isn't up yet." Just then, Ron bounded out of a portrait hole, hair all over the place. "Phew, everyone up? Sorry I'm late." Hermione snapped the book shut and hissed for him to follow. The three of them set off together. "Where are you off to?" Percy loomed from somewhere on the landing and peered at Ron with disapproval. "Just out for a walk," Ron snapped back, springing to defend himself. "Do not go sneaking into the girls' lavatory, and do not take Ginny with you. Percy warned sternly. He still remembered catching Ron idling in the third-floor lavatory last time and was displeased by what he took for his brother's disrespectful behavior. Ron flushed. "What's that got to do with you? And anyway, Ginny can go to the girls' lavatory if she wants." Percy had no answer to that, and the group moved on. 10 minutes later, in one of Myrtle's cubicles, Hermione stood over a cauldron, stirring a thick, greenish brew. "It looks disgusting," someone observed. "It's not finished," Hermione said. "We still need horn of a bicorn and skin of a boomslang, both of which we'll have to find in Snape's storeroom, and then a bit of hair or a fingernail from a Slytherin student. That part should be easy enough." She dropped knotgrass into the mixture and poked several leeches into the bottom of the cauldron. Cyrus, or rather, the boy who'd spoken, added a pinch of crushed dead lacewing flies. The potion hissed and smoked. Harry, whose broken bones had wrecked overnight, had left the hospital wing and wandered until he ran into Percy. Remembering the lavatory plan, he hurried there. He wasn't surprised to see Ginny. In his guilt, he'd been the one who'd let slip about her involvement the night before. He could barely keep from telling them everything at once. "Colin was petrified," he said, shame heavy on his face. "He came to see me. We already know," Hermione cut in. She'd just seen McGonagall and Flitwick, who'd been discussing the latest victims on the way to the infirmary. Ron, for all his grumbling about Colin, felt a flare of protective anger. "We need to get Malfoy to confess, and fast. He's been sulking since the Quidditch match, and he's been picking on Colin." They quickly reminded themselves that Colin could be saved. That was a small comfort. Harry then told them again about Dobby. The house elf's warning had convinced them even more of suspicion toward the Malfoys. Lucius Malfoy must have opened the chamber when he was at school, and now he's teaching Draco to do the same, Ron said. "It's the only thing that makes sense. I just wish Dobby had said what kind of creature's in there. How could it move around the school without anyone noticing?" "Maybe it can camouflage itself," Hermione suggested, dropping a few more ingredients into the cauldron. "Or disguise itself as armor or something. I read about color-changing ghouls in a book." She went back to stirring while Harry related how Dobby had interfered with his trip to Hogwarts, and how Dobby had been the one to try to protect him, even if clumsily. "Dobby stopped us from getting on the train, and he broke your arm," Ron said, shaking his head. "If he keeps trying to do this, he might end up getting you killed. First Lockhart," someone muttered, "then Dobby," and there was a rueful, helpless sound from the group as the pool of misfortune around Harry seemed only to grow. News that Colin Creevey had been attacked and lay in the hospital like a comatose patient only reached everyone on Monday morning. The whole school suddenly felt fragile. No one wanted to be alone. Secretly, behind their teachers' backs, students began to exchange amulets, talismans, and protective trinkets. The practice spread like wildfire. Neville Longbottom, convinced of the need for protection, bought a pungent, oversized green onion, a sharp amethyst, and a rotting newt tail. The common room took on a permanent, unpleasant stench that even Cyrus found unbearable. "Neville, you don't need these," Cyrus said, fanning his nose. "You're pureblood. You won't be attacked." "But he attacked Filch, and everyone knows I'm practically a squib," Neville whispered, eyes wide. The smell drove Cyrus to hand Neville the bundle back. Then he returned to Ginny and slipped back into the diary to continue his research on alchemy and charms. "Hello, Mr. Riddle, has the Quidditch match finished?" Ginny asked drowsily. Cyrus realized with a jolt that he hadn't returned her body for days. He had recorded every moment of the match in his head, but he had overlooked returning control. "It ended 2 days ago, Ginny. Today is Monday," he said carefully. "Monday?" Ginny blinked, taken aback. "Has something happened, Mr. Riddle?" "Colin Creevey was attacked." Cyrus softened his face to seem solemn. Ginny's expression went white. She sat next to Colin in charms, and they were friends. "If Colin had been hurt, it's my fault," Cyrus added quickly, taking responsibility. "When that cat was attacked earlier, I treated it like a prank. I was the one who urged him to sneak out and try to see Harry. If I hadn't suggested it, he might never have been there." "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again," he said. "I want to find the culprit. I plan to infiltrate Slytherin with Harry and the others and see if we can get any clues." "This isn't your fault, Mr. Riddle." Ginny snapped. Who knows how mad the hair of Slytherin is? If it wasn't Colin, it would have been someone else. They want to target Muggleborns. Cyrus also told her about the polyjuice potion. They needed to be careful. Sorry, Ginny. I may need to borrow your body more often while we investigate, he said. Ginny shook her head. That's fine. The sooner we find the heir, the better. She understood the weight of his guilt and agreed without hesitation. She had almost forgotten Quidditch anyway. After that, her own consciousness stirred less and less often. December came with heavy snow. Professor McGonagall circulated a stack of forms for students who planned to stay at Hogwarts over the holidays. Malfoy plans to stay at school for Christmas, Harry said suspiciously. That's too odd. But the polyjuice potion isn't ready yet, Hermione snapped. We have to steal some from Snape's supplies and potions this Thursday, or we won't get it brewed in time. We need a diversion. Harry and Ron's faces fell. The idea of stealing from Snape felt worse than facing Voldemort. I'll do it, Cyrus volunteered. You lot make a commotion in class, and I'll slip in. No, Ron protested as if Cyrus had announced his own death. I can't let you get expelled. I'll go. Not a chance, Hermione cut in. I haven't any record. Clever, but Snape would notice if a student went missing during class, Cyrus pointed out. His office is right behind the classroom. How could anyone slip in unnoticed while we're all there? There is a way, Cyrus turned to Harry. Lend me your invisibility cloak. Harry had forgotten he even had it. He tended to toss it about like an old coat. That evening, Cyrus borrowed the cloak. He draped it over himself and wandered the castle, testing it, wondering what made the legendary Deathly Hallow so special. To him, the cloak's magic felt like a perfected disillusionment charm more than some ultimate force. Compared with the supposed power of the Elder Wand or a resurrection stone, it seemed almost ordinary. If it couldn't hide from Moody's magical eye, how could it hide from Death's gaze? Maybe the stories were just that, stories. As Dumbledore had suggested, perhaps the Peverell brothers were simply extraordinarily powerful, dangerous wizards who created remarkable artifacts that became exaggerated into legend. Whatever the truth, the cloak did have a rare quality. Cyrus fingered the cold fabric as he climbed to the 8th floor and muttered to himself, I need a room where I can study magical artifacts. He repeated the phrase, under his breath at first, then louder. On the third time, beneath the painting of the troll, a door shimmered into being on an otherwise blank wall. Cyrus shrugged off the cloak, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The door sealed and vanished behind him. The room resembled the potions classroom, but was not the same. Alongside cauldrons were mechanical assemblies, devices that looked like machines but were the products of alchemy. In the wizarding world, alchemy and potion making were not wholly separate disciplines. They overlapped and fed into one another. Cyrus surveyed the strange, gear-filled laboratory with interest. The original aim of alchemy had been simple, to transmute base metals into precious ones, especially gold. Over time, the field branched out. Elixirs, the philosopher's stone, the creation of artificial life. To this day, Nicholas Flamel stood alone as the only person known to have both transmuted lead into gold and attained something like immortality. Alongside these high goals, however, a number of strange magical artifacts had appeared. Pensieves, time-turners, vanishing cabinets, objects unrelated to alchemy's three ultimate aims, but no less wondrous in their effects. Cyrus spread the invisibility cloak on the table and examined it. He had spent recent weeks poring over alchemical texts, so noticing the cloak's oddities was not difficult. Ordinary invisibility cloaks were woven from the fur of the Demiges, a silver, ape-like magical creature. The Demiges' natural power to become unseen was in effect the cloak's source. But this cloak felt much colder to the touch than Demiges fur should. The Demiges' invisibility, he knew, was represented by the rune 0. If this material wasn't Demiges fur, what else could it be? He raised his wand and let a faint light play along the cloak's surface. The light revealed texture, and beneath it, innumerable runes. Cyrus made out Tewaz and Algiz, Tewaz associated with immortality, Algiz with protection. In the older days, runes were commonly used on alchemical products. They carried potent power that could not easily be unleashed through ordinary spells, but engraving them into a magical object could help activate their strength. Runes were difficult to understand, however. They were not merely a foreign language. Most people, even if they could translate the characters, could not resonate with them, and so could not awaken the magic. As a result, rune studies had dwindled into something like archaeology, a translation exercise rather than living craft. There was, he thought, a powerful disillusionment charm woven into this cloak. A strong spell bound to an immortal substance. That combination could explain why the cloak's magic endured. Cyrus wondered if the Elder Wand worked on a similar principle. The Elder Wand was made of elderwood and thestral hair. Elderwood was rare, but not impossible to find, yet Gringotts had never been able to produce a wand to match it. Perhaps the secret lay less in the materials than in the curse that bound the wand. Dumbledore and Harry had both believed that if the Elder Wand's original owner died a natural death, the wand's power would be broken, its curse undone, and the wand reduced to an ordinary stick. Cyrus set the cloak aside. He could not keep it forever. He could not hope to untangle its mysteries in a few days. Research on the Philosopher's Stone, however, was more pressing. He opened Nicholas Flamel's handbook and skimmed past the visions and ruminations to a passage that read like a hymn. The Philosopher's Stone is ancient and enigmatic, the least understood, the most sacred. It is the mystery of mysteries, the crowning fruit of the wise. It is the perfect essence of the elements, indestructible, the fifth element, living mercury with its own spirit, that can reconcile imperfect metals. It is eternal radiance, a cure for all ailments, an elixir of life, the most precious treasure. The recipe that followed was blunt and technical: mercury, sulfur, salt, refinement using the four qualities: hot, cold, dry, wet, breaking and remaking internal and external elements. Cyrus set a cauldron on the fire. He poured in mercury and let the flame lick the sides. Fire, hot and dry. Water, cold and wet, he murmured, stirring as he fed a steady stream of magic into the metal. He added sulfur, lumps of salt, and earth. Earth, hot and wet. The mixture began to froth and then boil. The color shifted slowly to a crimson hue. The stone, the book said, was crimson, but no solid mass formed. The fire kept burning and the liquid kept agitating. Steam drove off the cold and damp, until at last only a few grains of crimson powder clung to the bottom. He pinched some between finger and thumb and felt nothing vital in them. It failed, he said. He did not lose heart. Flamel himself had written that he did not fully understand how he had succeeded. For centuries, others had tried to reproduce his work and never repeated the miracle. The Philosopher's Stone could not be that simple, Cyrus reasoned. Nicholas's notes might contain the outline, but some crucial accident or coincidence during Flamel's original refinement must have made the difference. Something small, something amiss in any recipe book. In this world, even a stray breeze, a shaft of sunlight, or a particular sound could change the outcome of an alchemical process or a potion. Animagus practice required dew untouched by sunlight and the first thunderclap of a storm, for example. Details that mattered more than they seemed. Time pressed. He could revive himself without the stone, but the cost would be Ginny's life, to take another's life force entirely. He had long considered Ginny a friend and could not bring himself to sacrifice her for his own resurrection. If he were forced, he thought, he might take only a portion and then leave, less than what full revival demanded, though even that would be monstrous. If he could not make the stone by the end of term, he told himself grimly, he would have to leave Hogwarts in the condition shown in the movie, perhaps in an even worse state. Ginny's condition was already perilously close to death in the original account. Perhaps I need to find a new host, he admitted, the thought cold and clinical. Cyrus packed away the cauldron. On Thursday, Cyrus waited for Harry's potions class. The dungeon classroom was dim. Snape always shut the windows tight the moment he entered. Without the few torches along the walls, it would have been pitch black. That wasn't only Snape's brooding temperament. Most potions were spoiled by strong light, so the gloom was practical as well as ominous. Cloaked in his invisibility cloak, Cyrus drifted in with the crowd and followed Harry through the maze of benches to where the Gryffindor's cauldrons bubbled. He kept going to the corner of the raised platform, where a wooden door led to Snape's office. Snape swept into the room like a bat unfolding its leathery wings, his robes billowing. He scanned the class with that sharp, white stare, lingering a fraction longer on Harry before sneering and speaking in his usual cold drawl. Today, we will be brewing a swelling solution. I trust each of you has the sense to follow the textbook precisely. The potion must neither be too concentrated nor too weak, otherwise. He let the threat hang and fixed his gaze on the Gryffindor table, lingering particularly on Neville, Seamus, and Harry. Whether I give anyone a shrinking potion after an accident will depend entirely on my mood. Harry's skill in potions wasn't bad, but Neville and Seamus sat beside him, and the pair practically guaranteed trouble. Neville fumbled so often his clumsiness threatened everyone nearby. Even if Harry brewed perfectly, Snape could and would penalize Gryffindor for the table's disasters. The implication hung in the air. You're sitting there and not helping? Gryffindor, 10 points lost. You help and fail? 10 points lost. The Slytherins snickered, pleased by their head of house's obvious bias, while the Gryffindors stiffened and said nothing. Why aren't you starting? Snape demanded. Neville immediately began to fumble. What do I add first? He asked, face flushed, hands shaking around the ingredients. Grind the herbs into a powder first. It's in the book, Harry whispered. No whispering. Snape snapped and then stalked over to Neville's bench. Neville went white. His mind seemed to blank out entirely. Cyrus watched, amusement and tension warping together. When Snape focused on Neville, Cyrus flicked his wand and sent a tiny spark into Crabbe's cauldron. Crabbe's mixture erupted. The swelling solution exploded, splattering the classroom. Screams erupted as potion hit robes and faces. Malfoy's nose ballooned grotesquely. Crabbe staggered, hands over his eyes as they puffed up. Chaos reigned until Snape roared, "Silence! Silence!" For a heartbeat, Cyrus feared he'd been caught. Snape's scowl swept the room, and to Cyrus's relief, settled on Harry and his friends, suspected but not certain. Cyrus slipped through the gap and into the office doorway. Passing Malfoy on the way, he pinched out a few strands of hair. Malfoy's shriek was even more comical in that moment. "Students hit by the potion, come to me for a shrinking potion," Snape called. "Once I discover who did this." He did not finish, but Cyrus was already in Snape's office. Inside, the tip of Cyrus's wand lit the dim room, and a wall of bottles and jars glittered into view. Horn of a bicorn, skin of a boomslang, Cyrus murmured as he plucked the required items from the shelves. He took more than he needed. Draughts and ingredients used to restore life and strength, tucked them into the folds of his cloak. He wasn't terribly afraid of being caught. Even if Snape complained, what could he do? Dumbledore already knew something was wrong, something related to him, the shadow of Lord Voldemort, or at least a malign influence connected to that name. No one had yet decided whether it was Voldemort himself, a Horcrux, or some cursed object manipulating events. Dumbledore preferred to watch and protect where he could. After last year's disaster, Quirrell's ruined body, and the clear toll Tom Riddle's presence took on a host, Dumbledore had reason to believe that Harry might again be central to whatever was happening. And if possession drained life, Ginny Weasley could be in real danger. Cyrus used that as justification to help himself to Snape's stores. By the time Cyrus slipped back out, Snape had already administered shrinking potions to the students who had been swelled. He stood now by the ruined cauldron, chin lifted, eyes cutting across the room. A little spark. His gaze landed on Harry and his companions. Clever tricks. Using spells will be your undoing. Harry Potter, he said, sneering. Why don't you produce your wand and let me check what spells you've cast? No, no. Snape's stare felt like it was trying to strip Harry down to his bones, and Harry hated it. Demanding his wand, Snape intended to use Prior Incantato to see what spells Harry had performed. Cyrus thought so and chuckled to himself. A good idea, he mused, but the wrong target. By the time Cyrus stepped out of the cloak, still fully covered, Snape had already snatched Harry's holly wand and muttered the spell. The tip thrummed and vomited up an echo of a spell, not crackling red sparks this time, but the shadow of an engorgement charm. Sir, that was a new spell Professor Flitwick taught us last class, Harry said stubbornly, meeting Snape's gaze. Snape studied his green eyes through the lenses and, astonishingly, did not press the point. He changed tack instead. Is that so? And does Mr. Potter therefore believe he need not learn how to brew an engorgement potion? I didn't, sir. Didn't? Then why is your potion so diluted? Snape snapped, seizing on any pretext. 10 points from Gryffindor. 10 points from Gryffindor. Harry mimicked later in the bathroom, theatrically reenacting Snape deducting them. I don't know if you saw Ginny. He was just looking for trouble. Not entirely. Your potion was too weak, Hermione replied matter-of-factly. But I didn't expect prior incantado. We almost got found out. Good thing Ginny was the one who stole the potion. The strange thing is he didn't bring it up again in the second half of potions, Ron said, puzzled. And Harry, please don't keep staring Snape down like that. I'm always worried you two will start a fight. Or kiss, he didn't say. Cyrus felt a tiny prick in his mind at the idea. Wait, Ron, what did you just say? Harry stared Snape down? Yes, what's wrong with that? Harry shrugged. Even if he can take points, I'm not backing down. Let him take them. I'm not going to let him think I'm a coward. You're wrong, Harry, Cyrus said lightly. If you don't stare him down, Snape will probably find somewhere to have a good cry. He joked, but his real worry was the stare. Everyone knew how skilled Snape was at occlumency, so good that even Voldemort would struggle to find a weak place. And occlumency was developed to block legilimency. If Snape was a master of occlumency, he couldn't be bad at legilimency either. When Harry had stared him down, there was a good chance Snape read more than just a challenge. The prior incantado and the stern pose had been theater. Snape didn't want to admit he was protecting James Potter's son. What bothered Cyrus more was that Snape probably knew Ginny had been involved too. That meant another careful eye watching every move around Hogwarts. Cyrus, who had not grown up in the wizarding world and was less attuned to magic, felt exposed and annoyed. He just hoped nothing unexpected would happen. In the cramped toilet cubicle, steam rose in lazy swirls and the potion bubbled like thick tar. Hermione dutifully added the powdered snakeskin and a tiny shard of horn. There, should be ready in a little over a week, she said, rubbing her neck. Let's get out of here. My neck's going stiff. I don't know why you two can't help but cram in here. Snape returned silently to his classroom. He glared at the empty spots on his shelves and hissed to himself. Horn of a bicorn and boomslang skin, planning to brew polyjuice potion? If you can actually make it, I'll have to give you a few words of praise. His mouth formed the faintest of twitches. He regretted that Harry had not inherited Lily's natural talent for potions. If anyone should be behind a perfect polyjuice, it ought to be that know-it-all girl. Harry and Ron were hardly qualified to help. Ginny, though, she did show some promise. Still, Snape despised Hermione's lack of improvisation, no creativity. But what made Snape truly furious was the theft. How dare she steal my dragon's blood? 17 sickles an ounce, he ground his teeth. The jar on the shelf was nearly empty, at least 6 pints gone. Just the dragon blood alone represented a loss of over 100 galleons, and it wasn't the only thing missing. 3 drops of phoenix tears. I practically begged Dumbledore for those. The rune spore venom. Well, I can extract more from my own brood, so I'm not heartbroken about that. But she even took my snakes? His voice climbed. The boxes where he kept his snakes were empty. Even a few recently hatched eggs had vanished. A tuft of chimera hair. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Chimera materials were rated XXXX for danger. There were almost no successful kills recorded, and their parts were priceless. He ticked the list off one by one, each loss twisting his features more tightly. A jar of morning dew? Cheap as it is, I collected that leaf by leaf in the Forbidden Forest. Nearly broke my back for that one. His hands trembled, and his face went pale. The anger, the humiliation, the strain was too much. Snape swayed and fainted. Back in the cubicle, the conversation turned to the theft. I always thought Snape wouldn't give up, Hermione said. I just hope he doesn't find out we took his stuff. And you didn't sneak any extras, did you? Ron glanced at Cyrus with suspicion. Cyrus produced a few snake eggs from inside his sleeve, placing them on his wand to roast. He shrugged and thought aloud, No, don't be so worried. I'll treat you to roasted eggs. Ron didn't need asking twice. He cracked one open. A warm, savory smell puffed out instantly. Delicious, he sighed, and began to eat. He hummed tunelessly, half to himself, half in misery. Why do I have to work on Monday? And trailed away into a little disgruntled, happy hum. Chapter 31. Lockhart. What ability can a stinky potions master have? Snape woke and, without wasting a second, strode straight to Dumbledore's office. If he didn't get his potion supplies back, he could hardly prove anything. Legilimency wasn't accepted as evidence by the ministry. Memories could be altered. Still, a loss of more than 1,000 galleons needed someone to blame, and it simply could not be him. He arrived fuming and found another tiresome peacock already there. "Please wait, Severus," Dumbledore said gently. "Good afternoon, Snape." Lockhart smiled his practiced, insufferable smile, which only made Snape angrier. "Why are you here? Did you hear I'm applying to start a dueling club and come to volunteer as my assistant?" "Dueling club?" Snape's annoyance flickered into contempt. He could hardly believe Lockhart would imagine himself suited. Lockhart, entirely oblivious to the scorn, went on as if the world agreed with him. "The situation is grim. Someone has been hurt. We need to train the students properly, prepare them to defend themselves with the techniques I've used so many times. I'm a member of the Dark Arts Defense Association. Really, who's more qualified than me?" He looked at Dumbledore expectantly. Dumbledore's smile widened. "How about Phileas? He was a dueling champion in his youth," he suggested warmly. At the words dueling champion, Lockhart stiffened and paced for a moment, then recovered with a ready excuse. "Phileas was formidable once, yes, but I doubt he could keep up with my pace now. Honestly, if dueling hadn't fallen out of fashion in Britain, I very well might be the current champion." Even Snape had to suppress a snort. Lockhart glanced at him and, recalling a hazy memory of Snape's school days, a skinny, sullen Slytherin who was bullied by Gryffindors and, supposedly, didn't bother with his hair, decided he must have no talent. What could a sullen potions master do in a duel? Burn a cauldron dry? With that thought, Lockhart's eyes gleamed and he jabbed a barb. "Professor Snape, you are a— Never mind. I'm afraid my mighty talents might wound you. Perhaps I should find someone else." "You would wound me? How amusing." Snape laughed, sharp and cold. His look at Lockhart was hostile enough to be a spell. "Coincidentally, I know a thing or two about dueling," Snape said. "Perfect." Lockhart leapt at the opportunity, worried Snape might refuse. He clapped both hands on the other man's shoulders with exaggerated camaraderie. "That's settled then. Dumbledore, let Snape be my assistant. Don't worry. I'll make sure the potions master stays safe." Snape jerked away and wiped Lockhart's hand off his cloak with an expression of disgust. Dumbledore, pleased, prepared to see them out. "So, Severus, what did you come for?" he asked. Snape's temper flared again at the interruption. He spoke before Lockhart could finish smoothing his hair. "I came to report thieves. My potion supplies have been stolen." "Stolen?" Lockhart, almost out the door, spun back at once. Well, my assistant has run into trouble. Catching thieves is right up my alley. If you've read my books, you know I've done it countless times. I can find clues, I can find culprits. Leave it to me. I'll have the thieves brought to justice by tomorrow." He hustled forward with all the theatrical fervor he could muster. Neither Dumbledore nor Snape paid much attention. They had communicated everything with a single look. "The school board will compensate you," Dumbledore said to Snape. "And be careful." "You don't have to tell me," Snape replied, sweeping his cloak as he turned to go. Lockhart didn't want to miss the chance to be helpful. He followed, chattering in Snape's ear. "Seriously, Severus, with me on the case, we'll catch them for sure. I'll do it for free, of course. We're colleagues. Come to your office. I have an automatic tracking charm. One cast, and I'll pick up the culprit's trail." Snape shivered inwardly. He remembered the last time he'd used a crude, desperate spell intended to help, how badly it had gone. One of his own jinxes had almost stripped bones away when he'd tried a rough, improvised healing on a child. The memory of that unintended violence made him wary of letting Lockhart loose around anything magical that could affect a student. He had gone against his nature to protect that boy before, and the thought that someone like Lockhart would get in the way and risk harm, especially to Lily's son, made his face harden. "Dueling club," Snape said. A cruel smile that was anything but friendly. "I'll be very happy to be your assistant." Translation: "Don't get comfortable." Lockhart, lost in his own imagined glory, was delighted. "Excellent. We'll hold it before Christmas. I may ask you to help with a small demonstration. Don't worry, nothing lethal. We'll stick to defensive spells, Expelliarmus, Protego." He hesitated. "Well, Protego can be tricky, so maybe we'll concentrate on Expelliarmus." Snape's smile didn't change as he listened. He cleaned dust from his sleeve with the back of his hand and thought of how closely he would watch anyone who came near the students. Thanks to reader 13384596737456328 for the 500-point reward. Thank you. And to everyone else, please keep reading. It really means a lot to me. 32. Snape. You better be. Ginny felt singled out. Ever since she'd slipped a small item from Snape's private collection, the potions master had kept his eye on her. When she wandered the castle, he would materialize as if from the shadows, his sullen gaze raking over her like an interrogation. She suspected he tried legilimency, she could always tell, but it had no effect on her. In potions, the man's dislike was even more blatant. He looked as if he could smell her from across the room. Miss Weasley, could you please tell me how many uses dragon's blood has? He asked in the last potions class before Christmas, as though he enjoyed picking at her. 12, sir. Ginny stood. The question stung. She had expected something the sort of question that would flummox most first years, not a mere listing from the textbook. Still, she answered calmly. The 12 uses of dragon's blood were summarized by Headmaster Dumbledore. It can staunch bleeding, relieve pain, help healing. It's used in cleansers, blemish remedies, wart cures, and so forth. Correct. Snape's tone was thin with displeasure. Now, why don't you tell me the effects of phoenix tears? But sir, we don't study phoenixes, Ginny said, refusing to be browbeaten. Besides, you might want to know the uses of phoenix tears, rune spore venom, chimera mane, in case you ever get poisoned. That seems useful, doesn't it? Her voice carried a light, insolent edge, an open hint that she knew more than she ought to, and a quiet, polite way of saying, "You know who I am, Professor." Snape's face darkened. Now tell me, the uses of morning dew. Who knows? Maybe for animagus practice, she shrugged. The answer was deliberately flippant. She certainly didn't have hold of a death's head hawkmoth pupa, nor did she have anyone else's body to transform. Snape's patience snapped. You'd better be, he snapped back, loud enough for most of the class to hear. He ended the lesson by docking 5 points from Gryffindor, accusing her of fidgeting in her seat before dismissing the class. He doesn't like you. Luna's airy voice floated over in that detached way she had. Ginny turned to see Luna Lovegood, with her protuberant eyes and odd clothes, smiling as if offering an observation about the weather. Evidently, Ginny said. How could she expect a middle-aged professor she'd annoyed to take a shine to her? It was well known that the one person Snape had ever shown any warmth toward was Lily Potter. You look very strange, but much better than before, Luna added, flicking her hair as she skipped away like a small, eccentric sprite. Ginny was half amused, half impressed by Luna's uncanny knack for stating the obvious. Ginny parted ways with her Ravenclaw companions on the 8th floor and walked through the entrance hall toward the common room. A crowd had formed around the notice board. What's happening? They're forming a dueling club. The first meeting's tonight. Fred and George Weasley had popped out of the throng to explain. Fred flung his arm around his sister's shoulders in a conspiratorial, theatrical way. Do you remember when you hexed Marcus at the match last term? What? Are you worried he'll get back at me? Ginny bumped her shoulder against his. If he's got any sense, he won't, Fred scoffed, but he might rope in other second and third year Slytherins. We don't know. George beamed. But you shouldn't be afraid, right? If you're confident, Harry'll fall in love with you for sure. Ginny rolled her eyes. The twins, of course, meant well. They were always eager for mischief. We think this dueling club could be our chance, Fred continued. The Slytherin lot have been pestering us lately. A fair fight is exactly what we need. So what do you want me to do? Ginny asked. Target the younger Slytherins. Fred glanced at George with a grin. Even better if it's Malfoy, George interjected. Don't forget his father gave us a hard time over the summer. Give them a good beating, the twins finished in unison with exaggerated menace. Ginny nodded. If the Slytherins meant to start trouble, she wouldn't back down. Percy emerged from the crowd then, elbowing his way forward and placing himself like a stern guard between Ginny and the twins. He peered at Fred and George with undisguised disapproval. What are you two trying to get Ginny into? Nothing, Fred said at once, exchanging a guilty, playful look with George. They put on mock-hurt expressions. Oh no, Percy. Why would you think we'd lead her astray? Ginny doesn't need us to lead her astray. George tutted, as if meaning that Ginny hardly needed encouragement to be adventurous, especially after her impromptu antics in the stadium. Percy's voice softened as he turned to Ginny and patted her shoulder. You're different from them, Ginny. The professors have praised you. Your performance is excellent. Hermione told me how hard you study. This could be very good for you. He had that air of earnest ambition of his house, eyes bright. If you keep this up, you could be a prefect in your 5th year, maybe even head student after that. Those positions matter. It opens doors in the ministry. I got my first placement quickly after leaving Hogwarts. Titles count. He swallowed and looked pleased with his own advice. Plan early. Take all your options in 3rd year. It'll be tiring, but worth it. Don't pick up Fred and George's habits. They're not good role models. And definitely don't pick up Ron. He's too playful. No direction. Ginny listened, amused and slightly bemused by Percy's plans for her. The twins exchanged a look that said they'd been given the perfect setup for future mischief. Around them, the castle hummed with the kind of petty rivalries and grand ambitions that made Hogwarts feel alive, and for the first time in a while, Ginny felt the ordinary heat of it: annoying professors, scheming classmates, brothers looking out for her, and a dueling club to test herself in. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Cyrus and Harry returned to the Great Hall with a few others. The hall had been transformed, the long dining tables were gone, and a gilded stage stood against one wall, lit by hundreds of candles floating in the air. The ceiling was velvety black again. Almost every student in the school was there, crowded together, each clutching a wand, faces full of anticipation. The 4 of them, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Cyrus, used their small size to wedge into the press of bodies. I wonder who'll teach us, Hermione said, breathless. I heard Professor Flitwick was a dueling champion when he was young. Maybe it'll be him. Whoever it is, as long as it's not, Harry began, and broke off when the 2 people he least wanted to see stepped onto the stage. Gilderoy Lockhart in magenta robes, flamboyant as ever, and Professor Snape in his usual black, his expression like a blade. Harry's unfinished sentence dissolved into a groan. Hermione, however, glowed with delight. She still believed every glowing word Lockhart had ever written. All his clumsiness was lost beneath his charming smile. Even in the wizarding world, good looks got you far. Tom Riddle's success was proof enough. Lockhart basked in the noisy approval of hundreds of mainly female students. Gather round, gather round. Can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? Excellent. He flourished and preened. Professor Dumbledore has very kindly allowed me to set up this little dueling club to teach you the proper way to defend yourselves, as I have done many times in my career. For further details, I refer you to my many publications. He beamed at them. May I introduce my assistant, Professor Snape? He threw a wide, self-satisfied grin. He has some experience with dueling as well, and has kindly agreed to help me with a demonstration. Rest assured, once I've finished, I'll return your potions professor to you in one piece. No need to worry. Wouldn't it be great if they both got badly hurt? Ron muttered into Harry's ear. Come on, Lockhart probably couldn't last a second against Snape, Cyrus said quietly. I heard Snape's the strongest of the 4 heads of house. If Snape had ever given himself over to the dark arts, his power would be terrifying. Even as a student, he had been noteworthy. Sirius had told Harry that Snape knew more curses and hexes at 11 than most 7th years. Harry watched Snape's upper lip curl in amusement, an expression like a cat playing with a mouse. He couldn't imagine why Lockhart was still smiling. He'd have fled long before now. Some people are so swallowed by their own lies they begin to believe them, Cyrus murmured. Ron gaped. You're not shy now? Cyrus ignored him. Lockhart and Snape faced each other and bowed. Lockhart flourished his wand with showy twirls. Snape gave a single impatient flick of his head. They raised their wands, holding them in the standard dueling stance, and the students fell silent, watching as if 2 great masters about to clash on a mountain peak. As you can see, we hold our wands like this, Lockhart said. On the count of 3, we will cast the first spell. Of course, neither of us will take the other's life. I wouldn't bet on it, Snape muttered, showing his teeth. 1, 2, 3. Snape's voice was a quick slash. Expelliarmus! A blinding red jet of light shot from his wand. Lockhart was hurled backward off the stage, slammed into the wall, and slid down to the floor, curled up and almost out cold. Slytherins, Malfoy among them, whooped and clapped. Hermione bounced on her toes. "Do you think he's all right?" she gasped, her hands over her mouth. "Who cares?" Ron and Harry said together. Lockhart scrambled to his feet, his hat gone and his hair standing on end. He staggered back onto the stage, reeling from the residual shock. The students' suspicious looks made him hurry. He plastered on a smile. "Yes, that was an Expelliarmus. As you can see, I lost my wand. Ah, thank you, Miss Brown." He turned to Snape, all grin and charm. "Professor Snape, a most instructive idea, though a trifle obvious, I'm afraid. If I had wanted to stop you, it would have been effortless. To broaden their horizons, we should let them see." "Shameless," Cyrus whispered. He suspected Snape regretted using a comparatively mild spell when something far nastier might have made his point more decisively. The murderous look on Snape's face said as much. Lockhart, desperate to regain control, hurried them on. "The demonstration is over," he announced. "Now I'll mingle and form you into pairs. Professor Snape, if you'd be so kind." They moved through the crowd, pairing students off. Lockhart matched Neville with Justin Finch-Fletchley, then Snape pushed forward. "I think the dream team should be separated," he sneered. "Weasley, you with Finnegan. Potter," Harry instinctively stepped closer to Hermione. "I don't think so," he said. Snape's smile was cold. "Malfoy, come here. Let's see what you can make of the famous Potter." He turned to Hermione. "Miss Granger, you can pair with Miss Bulstrode." Then he fixed Ginny Weasley with a leer and smirked, a distinctly unpleasant expression. Cyrus saw Malfoy striding toward him, followed by a burly girl, clearly the Miss Pasture Professor Snape had mentioned. In the crowd, he also spotted Fred and George, half hidden, waving and cheering him on. Fred even mouthed something. "Don't forget to teach the Slytherins a lesson. As for you, Ginny Weasley, I think someone will be happy to partner with you," Professor Snape sneered. "Flint, your chance has come." He stepped aside, and a hulking boy who looked stronger than an ape came forward with a cruel smile. The noise in the great hall dropped noticeably. Even Fred and George's frantic waving seemed to stop, as if they'd been petrified. Ron couldn't keep quiet. "He's finally gone mad," he blurted. Snape shot him a fierce glare, but Ron didn't back down. Make a first-year duel a sixth year. What else could that be but madness? Besides, Marcus Flint had been ambushed by Ginny before. He would be ready this time. Percy pushed forward, frowning, and put himself between Cyrus and Flint. "Professor, I think this is unreasonable," he said. "I'll take Flint." Lockhart rubbed his hands nervously. He wouldn't contradict Snape, but even he had to admit the arrangement was outrageous. "We hold this club to teach young wizards how to handle danger, not to. I think Flint is perfectly suited to play the role of danger, don't you?" Snape cut in with a sneer. "Or perhaps, Miss Weasley, you who are so fond of ambushes, look down on this vanquished opponent?" Others murmured, but Cyrus interrupted. "He'll do," Cyrus said simply. "Professor Snape makes a fair point. At least he looks like a dangerous, brainless troll. It's a pity Slytherin is recruiting students like him." That remark hit Slytherin like a slap. Malfoy's eyes flashed. He looked as if he'd like to hex Cyrus on the spot. Marcus Flint himself was livid. "You just wait," he snarled, moving to one side and putting distance between them. The rest of the students spread out to watch. Even pairs who'd been ready to duel stopped. The entire hall had shifted to watch this mismatch. The Slytherins leaned back with crossed arms, eager for a show. Professor Snape watched Cyrus closely. He wanted to see if this Ginny Weasley was really a mere first year and whether she could stand up to his legitimacy the way Dumbledore had warned him some first year had resisted Quirrell. "You shouldn't have agreed," Hermione hissed, tugging at Cyrus's sleeve. Ron and Harry stayed put, wands in hand, watching Flint carefully for a sneak attack. "We don't have to take part," Hermione said. "We can leave." "It's fine. What's there to be afraid of?" Cyrus answered casually. "We're with you," Ron said, gripping his taped broken wand and breathing hard. "Don't make things worse. Harry can stay," Cyrus said, pushing Ron back. Then he turned to Harry with a grin. "You can use that move Lockhart taught you." "What?" Harry blinked. When had Lockhart ever taught him a secret technique? "Mobiliar bus," Cyrus called, and shoved Harry aside. He drew his wand and planted himself in front of Flint. Before anyone could react further, Snape flicked his sleeve and stopped the others. "I think your opponents are over there." Malfoy sneered. "Let's have a few moves, Potter." Lockhart's face contorted with indecision. Hermione looked at him, hoping he'd stop the farce, but he wouldn't dare contradict Snape. "Face your partners," Lockhart called, returning to the dais. "Bow!" Cyrus extended his right hand to the side and gave a polite, even graceful bow. Flint had no intention of bowing. Cyrus frowned. "You should bow. I wouldn't bow to a little brat like you." Marcus retorted, and the Slytherins erupted in laughter, thinking it an insult to Gryffindor. "You're a disappointment," Cyrus said coldly. "Slytherin is so uncouth. Etiquette is necessary." He raised the arm that held his wand above his head, wrist turned down so the tip of the wand pressed from above. Marcus's mocking smirk vanished. He felt his spine seize and his shoulders forced down as if someone pressed on them with heavy hands. He bent forward against his will, a sudden, humiliating bow. The laughter died. Even Harry, Ron, and Hermione felt a chill. None of them had seen anything like this from Ginny Weasley. "Enough," someone barked, and Cyrus nearly had Marcus bent to a 90-degree angle before Snape intervened with a sharp spell to break the pressure. Lockhart, trying to prevent another incident, shouted, "Wands up! When I count to 3, cast your spells to disarm your opponent. Just disarm. We don't want any accidents. 1, 2, 3. Marcus didn't wait for 3. The moment Lockhart hit 2, he shot a vicious curse at Cyrus. Cyrus barely glanced at it and flicked the curse aside as if swatting away an annoyance. He gave Marcus no time to recover. A sudden force grabbed Marcus's ankle. He flipped end over end and shot up, slamming into the majestic black velvet ceiling of the hall and hanging there, suspended like a turned-over puppet. The great hall went dead silent. Professor Snape's face tightened. The sight dredged up something unpleasant in him. Then he barked, "Finite incantum." The spell broke. Marcus dropped with a heavy thud to the floor. Someone, Snape, incredulous, demanded, "Ginny Weasley, how do you know that spell?" Finally done, Cyrus thought. Time to go home and play games. Snape's gaze was dark and furious as he stared at Marcus Flint dangling upside down. For a moment it was as if he were watching a younger version of himself. "Who taught you that, Ginny Weasley?" he demanded. He stalked straight for Cyrus. Cyrus, Ginny Weasley, the slight figure wrapped in black robes. The spell Cyrus had just used was, of course, the Incarcerus, Snape's own invention. After the incantation was leaked, it had become wildly popular around Hogwarts, to the point where Snape had once been humiliated by James Potter with his own creation. Years had dulled most memories of it, but Cyrus knew the spell. Snape had initially wondered if Ginny had been possessed the way Quirrell had been, but Voldemort didn't bother with such petty tricks. "Bill taught me," Cyrus said immediately. "When in doubt, blame Bill. He was probably off in some pyramid in Egypt anyway, and Bill's time at Hogwarts had only been about 10 years after Snape's, so it was plausible the spell had been common then." "William Arthur Weasley," Snape muttered. He'd heard of the remarkably accomplished Bill. With Cyrus's quick answer, he had no way to prove otherwise, so he let it lie. "Dean, shut up." Snape shot Marcus Flint a look that could curdle milk. The boy's face fell. It was obvious that Marcus would become Slytherin's disgrace from that moment on. Harry felt an odd surge of pleasure at Snape's humiliation, enough for Snape to notice and turn his ire on him. It seems some people, seeing others win by chance, think they can be equally lucky, he said, first glaring at Harry before turning his stony face to the rest. "Harry Potter, why don't you find your own opponent? Do you think that because others have succeeded by accident, you can too?" "Malfoy." Draco flicked one look at the dangling Marcus, and then, with all the confidence of a boy used to being wanted, stepped forward. "I'll take you on, Potter." Harry couldn't refuse. The rest of the students recovered from the earlier skirmish and scrambled for opponents. The hall devolved into chaos. Jinxes flew everywhere. Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw kept things relatively restrained, but Slytherin and Gryffindor treated this like old business reopened. Fred and George targeted the Slytherin beaters. Wood played tricks in his own way. Some seized the turmoil to turn on Cyrus, hoping to punish the student who had humiliated Slytherin. Cyrus, however, was not in the mood for politeness. He simply hung the troublemakers from the ceiling. 10 minutes later, Professor Lockhart, his voice shrill, called for a stop. The great hall ceiling was lined with a long row of students. From a distance, they looked like rows of green-dried meat. Snape trembled, whether from cold, rage, or both, and finally said nothing, only sweeping a broad counter-curse across the hall. He freed Malfoy, who had been hit by a pimple jinx, Harry, who had been under a dancing feet charm, and the batch of slumped, air-dried figures from the rafters. Oh dear, Lockhart trilled, hopping among the recovered students and peering at the results of the duels. Stand up there, Macmillan. Mind your head, Miss Fawcett. Apply pressure. Freeze. The bleeding will stop at once, me boot. He was regretting this appointment, deeply regretting it. His eyes looked unfocused, as though the room had suddenly become too much to bear. If only he had declined Dumbledore's suggestion in the first place. If he hadn't accepted the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, he wouldn't be standing here, trying to pretend he knew what he was doing. At last, having restored some order, Lockhart stood in the center of the hall, flustered. He glanced at Snape and quickly averted his eyes at the cold glitter there. I think it would be best for me to demonstrate how to repel unfriendly magic, Lockhart announced, trying to sound confident. A volunteer pair, Longbottom and Finch Fletchley. How about the two of you? Snape's lip curled. That's hardly a good idea, Professor Lockhart, he said, gliding forward like a malevolent bat. Longbottom can cause as much damage with the simplest spell as most students can with a whole book of charms. If we pit him against Finch Fletchley, there's a chance we'd have to put Mr. Finch Fletchley's remnants in a matchbox and send them to St. Mungo's. Neville's round face flushed, not from anger, but from being mistaken for Seamus. At that moment, Cyrus felt Snape's gaze sweep over him and returned it with a cocked eyebrow, daring Snape to pick him for the duel. Snape's eyes flicked from Cyrus to Harry. For an instant, it looked like he wanted Harry to make a fool of himself. But remembering Dumbledore's earlier words, Snape's gaze settled on Cyrus. How about Ginny Weasley and Marcus Flint? He suggested. Professor Lockhart blinked, startled despite himself. I don't think that would be quite appropriate. Miss Weasley is only a first year, after all, he protested, though he made no move to refuse Snape. Yes, quite excellent, Snape said slowly. But I think we can be a little lenient toward the loser, can't we? His voice held a thin, unmistakable threat. Lockhart shivered. All right then, Miss Weasley and Mr. Flint? Lockhart scrambled to comply and practically yanked Cyrus to the dueling stage. All right, Ginny. When Draco points his wand at you, do this, he said, brandishing his own wand and waving it in a ridiculous figure of 8 before it slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. If you can't give any useful advice, please step aside, sir, Cyrus snapped, annoyed. He shoved Lockhart out of the way with a hand as easily as one would move a nuisance aside. Ginny will win, right? Ron asked, desperately anxious. Of course she will, Hermione said, smoothing her hair as if that proved anything. Didn't you see her earlier? And Professor just taught her a few tricks. If by taught you mean dropped his wand, then yes, Ron muttered. He had a sense that Snape might be teaching Marcus something more useful, something to make him win. Believe in Ginny, Harry said, patting Ron on the shoulder. He couldn't quite get used to Snape actually directing attention away from him for once. When Marcus Flint swaggered onto the dueling platform, Snape stepped close and, half threatening, half instructional, whispered in his ear. I'm giving you another chance, Flint. I do not want to hear any more excuses. Yes, sir, Marcus mumbled. Snape leaned in and taught him a spell in a low voice. Marcus took his place opposite the small figure of Ginny, Cyrus now standing calmly on the other side, feeling the old humiliation and a fresh, gnawing fear. Slytherin had already assigned him the role of Fall Guy. Another loss would mean disgrace, transfer, or worse. He tried to make his swagger convincing, but his hands trembled. It was Thursday. He told himself to look forward to Friday, then choked back a sob. Marcus Flint and Cyrus stepped up onto the makeshift raised platform at the front of the Great Hall. It looked as if it had been thrown together out of dining tables. Flint's face was flushed with shame as he eyed his opponent warily. He was a 6th year, about to duel a 1st year, under the gaze of nearly 1,000 pupils. His opponent, however, looked utterly relaxed, as if none of it mattered. Flint felt humiliated. He had every reason to. Just a few minutes earlier, the 1st year who everyone insisted must be Ginny Weasley, had turned a dozen Slytherin students into dried, dangling snake shapes and hung them from the ceiling. The Gryffindors were deliberately noisy, but most of the other students weren't shocked. They were simply stunned. Now, forced up here, Marcus tried to put on a tough voice. "I'll teach you a lesson," he snarled, though he was sweating at the sight of Cyrus casually twirling his wand between his fingers. "I hope you put on a little more of a show," Cyrus said lightly. "Otherwise, Slytherin will have terribly low standards." For a man like Flint, brawny and not very subtle, the level of casting displayed by a first year could be intimidating. If Flint abandoned his wand and charged, he might well be more dangerous. "You can have the first move," Cyrus added with false generosity. "Even a sneak attack is fine." The insult made Flint clench his jaw. He gripped his wand tighter and breathed deep, trying to steady himself. "Don't be nervous, Marcus," he told himself. "You only slipped up earlier. She's just a first year. There's no way you can lose." Lockhart called, "Begin." This time Flint didn't leap forward. He drew back instead, suspicious and ready to defend. He feared his spells would be easily parried, as they had been before. Cyrus's calm, almost bored expression must have been maddening. He watched Flint like a hunter watching a nervous animal. Close up, Marcus looked less like a gorilla and more like a turtle withdrawing into its shell. He took one step forward, and Flint immediately took a step back. Slytherins around the hall yelped with anger and embarrassment. "What are you doing, Flint?" someone yelled. "You're a disgrace." "Teach! Drop out, you waste!" Malfoy's taunts were the loudest, as if their bravado could hide their own fear of the first year. Marcus shot Malfoy a venomous glare. Malfoy shrank back and went silent. Eventually, Marcus forced himself to act. He raised his wand. Cyrus was pleased he hadn't forgotten he was a wizard, and fired a loud stupefy. Marcus bellowed the incantation. He hadn't learned to perform it silently yet. Cyrus didn't bother with a full defense. He tilted his head and stepped aside. The bolt missed him by inches and smashed into the wall. From below, the spectators held their breath. From their viewpoint, Ginny Weasley seemed only capable of dodging Marcus's attacks rather than fighting back. Each spell that glanced past the small figure hit the castle's stones with a thud. "Ginny, fight back!" Ron shouted, panic in his voice. "Knock her down, Flint," the Slytherin boys cried. Marcus, thinking he had the advantage, increased the pace, firing denser streams of spells and closing in, hoping to force a mistake. Only Snape watched with a different expression. He saw Cyrus's effortless control. Effortless was almost too weak a word. The first year didn't seem to consider Flint a threat at all. Snape's face darkened. A first year, half a term in, defeating a sixth year would be extraordinary. The power gap now looked impossible. Something was not right about this Ginny Weasley. "You're getting boring, Mr. Flint," Cyrus said, voice suddenly edged. He flicked his wrist and his wand sang. The spell Marcus had been hurling so confidently was shattered in mid-flight as if nothing more than a spark. Flint froze, stunned, his earlier momentum dissolved. Under Cyrus's calm scrutiny, holding his wand suddenly felt like fragile armor. Cyrus raised his wand deliberately and let loose a powerful spell. The light from it cut across every face around the stage. Young wizards instinctively flinched and took a step back. "Protego!" Marcus cried and slammed up a shield. There was a muffled thud, like a dampened firework, and the platform trembled. The crowd murmured, alarmed and excited. Harry didn't look away. "He blocked it," he said softly. Flint swayed, his hands numb from the shock of it, but he had managed to deflect the blow. It was a relief. At least it seemed like relief. He had no idea he had only managed to withstand a controlled dueling test of power. A proper shield charm would have rebounded that force back at the caster, not merely held it. "How many times are you going to block, Flint?" Cyrus taunted. Marcus forced a look at the small figure opposite him and felt his stomach flip. The girl everyone thought she was, or the first year, wasn't a harmless child. She felt like a predator. He stumbled back a step, then heard Snape's cold voice hiss from behind him. "Use the spell I taught you, Flint." The words seemed to drive something into Marcus. He lurched forward again, not braver so much as pushed by a desperate resolve. "Serpensortia," he cried. A jet of black shot from the tip of his wand and coalesced on the floor. A snake, glossy and coiled, rose up hissing with fangs bared. Young wizards around the stage jumped back, pale. Marcus grinned triumphantly. The conjuration Snape had taught him had come out just as intended. Cyrus didn't show a flicker of fear. He regarded the snake with detached curiosity. By basilisk standards, it was a mere black tongue, but it hissed all the same. It looked more comical than terrifying. Cyrus chuckled. "Is that the best you've got, Flint? Don't tell me you think you can scare me with that." He handled Parseltongue with ease, certainly more controlled than Harry, who could sometimes speak it without meaning to. The first year could choose whether to use it. He didn't blurt it out accidentally. Humiliated by the slight, Marcus lashed out with another spell, this time an engorgement charm. The little black snake swelled like a balloon. Its body ballooned until its head nearly brushed the banquet ceiling. With one sweeping, enormous lash of its tail, the snake struck, and to everyone's astonishment, the blast of force knocked Marcus Flint himself backwards and off his feet. Chaos erupted. The younger students screamed and scattered like startled mice, tripping over one another. Tables were knocked. The great hall rang with shrieks and clatters. Lockhart's knees buckled in the confusion, and he toppled to the floor, sprawling amidst a scatter of silverware and robes. The duel had turned into pandemonium. Chapter 37, Parseltongue. The great hall echoed with the screams of first years. Many witches fainted outright, and even Snape's face drained of color. He wasn't afraid of a snake that was merely oversized. The fact it could be affected by an engorgement charm meant it wasn't a genuinely magical creature, had little resistance to magic, and could be killed with a single well-placed spell. But the commotion was dangerous. What if students were hurt? Snape couldn't help cursing Flint under his breath. The idiot who'd thought it a good idea to use an engorgement charm on a conjured creature. Now Flint lay unconscious, trampled or worse by his own creation. "Calm down." Snape had to throw a voice-amplifying spell so everyone could hear him. It was probably the loudest he had ever spoken. Harry felt the sound fill his ears and made him momentarily queasy. "Ginny, run!" Ron's face was white with panic. He, Percy, and the twins tried to force their way through the fleeing crowd to get to Ginny, but nearly 1,000 students surged like a rip current, carrying them away. Hermione looked frozen. She didn't know what to do, her mind blank until Harry shouted, "Send me over, Hermione!" "What?" "Send me next to Ginny," Harry called. "But how do I?" "Use the levitation charm on his clothes." Harry had an idea and blurted it out. If Hermione had been calmer, she might have thought it better to levitate Ginny straight to safety, but she didn't, so she cast the spell on Harry's robes. Wingardium Leviosa. Hermione's wand lifted. Harry felt his clothes snagged and hauled upward. His whole perspective shifted. He saw Hermione's panicked face, saw Ron struggling desperately to reach Ginny, but being pushed back, saw George and Fred held by Lee and Wood, and Percy's exhausted expression as the crowd swallowed him. The world spun, and then Harry was slammed onto the stage between Ginny and the immense black snake. Pain shot through his wrist from the fall. "Harry? Potter?" Both Cyrus and Snape said his name in the same breath. "How did you get here, Harry?" Cyrus asked, unnaturally calm. Harry tried to answer, but the pain in his wrist made him gasp. "Don't move. Potter, Weasley, let me." Snapey stepped forward, every muscle tense. He feared that any sudden motion from Harry or Ginny might provoke the snake. He dared not cast a killing spell. Even a dead, venomous snake could be dangerous. Its head alone might still bite. Harry, however, didn't listen. He could talk to snakes. Without thinking, he took a step closer and fixed his eyes on the black serpent. Cyrus watched the small figure of Harry and could see he was scared, yet he kept moving. Ginny was Ron's sister. Harry acted because he had to. Cyrus opened his mouth to protest. "Harry, you don't need to." But Harry had already. He spoke. The sound that came from him was hoarse and strange, full of sibilant hisses. The great hall fell utterly silent, more effectively than any amplification spell. The giant snake relaxed at once, lowering its head to rest against Harry's chest and looking unexpectedly tame. "It's all right, Ginny," Harry breathed, reaching out to stroke the snake's head. He turned then and realized the entire hall was staring at him in a mixture of horror and fascination. "What's wrong?" he asked, bewildered. Before anyone could answer, Cyrus seized Harry's wrist and pulled him off the stage. "Don't talk. Let's go," Ron said, grabbing Harry's other hand, and Hermione followed quickly. Wherever they passed, students parted like a sea, as if avoiding Harry himself. They ran up to the tower and into the now empty Gryffindor common room. Only when the portrait hole was shut did Ron let go and ask, voice sharp with disbelief, "You're a Parselmouth. Why didn't you tell us?" "A what?" Harry didn't understand, but he knew from their faces that something was seriously wrong. "A Parselmouth," Cyrus repeated, as if it were the most shocking revelation he'd ever heard. "You can speak to snakes." "I know, well, sort of," Harry tried to explain, still bewildered. "This is the second time. The first was at the zoo. There was a boa constrictor. It told me it had never been to Brazil, and I opened its enclosure somehow. I didn't mean to set it free. I didn't even know I was a wizard then." "A boa constrictor told you it had never been to Brazil?" Ron said faintly. "That's the sort of thing people talk about." "You can't be serious. Lots of people can do that," Harry added, uncertain. "You're wrong," Cyrus said, shaking his head. "Very few people can understand snakes. It's a rare gift, and it's not a good sign." "What do you mean, not good?" Harry asked. "If I hadn't calmed that snake down, it would have attacked Ginny." "So that's what you told it?" Cyrus said. "What do you mean? You heard me." "We didn't," Cyrus said. "You spoke in parcel tongue. It's the language of snakes. To everyone else, your words would have sounded like hissing and indistinct noises. To a snake, your voice can mean anything. To those listening, it sounded like you were encouraging it. It was creepy." Cyrus wasn't trying to be cruel. He simply had a facility with parcel tongue that made him aware of how other people reacted. "I know you'd never hurt me, Harry, but other people won't think that." Harry stared at him, stunned. "I was speaking another language? I didn't even know I was. How could I speak another language and not know it?" Ron and Hermione both looked grave. Hermione's voice dropped to a low, controlled tone. "It matters because Parseltongue was Salazar Slytherin's trait," she said. "That's why Slytherin's emblem is a serpent." Harry's mouth fell open. Cyrus added, "Now everyone will think you're descended from Slytherin, his heir or something. They'll think you opened the Chamber of Secrets." "But I'm not," Harry protested, a panic rising in his chest he couldn't name. "You'd have a hard time proving it otherwise," Hermione said. "Slytherin lived 1,000 years ago. Anyone could be claimed as his heir." "Not to mention," Cyrus said, looking into Harry's eyes, "rumors don't need your permission." The words hit Harry like a physical force. He felt the weight of the hall's silence and the 1,000 imagined whispers closing in on him. He had calmed the snake and saved Ginny, but now something new and darker had begun to move, something that would not wait for his explanation. The four of them sat in silence for a long while. Harry looked hollowed out, and Cyrus walked slowly to the window where fine, gray snow had begun to fall. Cyrus was thinking too. For a time, the only sound in the Gryffindor common room was the crackle of the fire. Not long after, Harry and Ron went upstairs to rest, probably worried some of the others would be coming back. After what had happened, Harry seemed lost. Escape felt like the easiest option. Only Cyrus and Hermione were left. The girl picked up a book and read for a little while, but sleepiness crept over her. "Shall we go to bed?" Hermione asked Cyrus. "But first, how about a bath? It's freezing." Cyrus, still occupying Ginny's body, nodded. "All right." Hogwarts had many washrooms. The dormitory bathrooms weren't as elaborate as the prefect's bathroom, but they were perfectly adequate, separated by gender. Since Cyrus was in Ginny's body, he could only use the girls' facilities. The bathhouse was warm. Enchanted water poured from the taps and filled the room with steam. Cyrus sat beside the small, familiar figure of Hermione while she carefully washed her thick hair. "Ginny, could you help me scrub my back?" "I can't reach," Hermione asked. "Of course," Cyrus said calmly. He wasn't a lolicon and had no interest in Hermione beyond the necessary courtesy of the body he occupied. The next morning, Cyrus, still looking much more refreshed as Ginny, came downstairs to find Harry silently watching the fire. Ron and Hermione were playing wizard's chess by the table. "Why are you all loafing about?" "Not going to class?" he asked. "Herbology's off today," Ron said, glancing up. "It's snowing like mad. Professor Sprout said the mandrakes need scarves and socks." Hermione leaned toward Cyrus and whispered, "It's hard on Harry. After yesterday, everyone's avoiding him." "I think I can help explain," Cyrus said after a moment's thought. Harry rose from the sofa before Cyrus could say more. "No, it's fine. Thanks. I don't care what they think. So long as you lot believe me, that's enough. Where are you headed? Ron asked when he saw Cyrus and Harry head toward the castle exit together. Just for some air, Harry said. Outside, the snow had already started to fall in earnest. Thick flakes swirled down, muffling sound and dimming the daylight through the castle windows. Don't worry too much, Harry, Cyrus said as they walked. People will see you couldn't have done that. They'll understand. Thanks, Ginny. Harry forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't really expect things to change. As Ginny had said yesterday, most people didn't care about the truth. They just needed a target. After so much had happened, people wanted an outlet. Blaming a famous person like Harry Potter was almost a relief to them. It made them feel clearer-headed by comparison. They split up fairly quickly. Cyrus didn't go to the Great Hall for breakfast. He walked instead to the third-floor bathroom and rinsed off quickly. The campaign of attacks had to continue. It wasn't violence for its own sake. Panic was necessary to draw attention to the incidents at Hogwarts, to force the school authorities into action, and Cyrus hoped create a way to sideline Dumbledore, if only temporarily. If he couldn't buy more time, even if he could be revived, Dumbledore would still be too formidable. He left the washroom alone. Somewhere in the walls of the castle, the basilisk was already moving through the pipes. Cyrus stepped out into the corridor and began to look for another target. The storm kept the castle emptier than usual. Only a few students ventured out into the wind and snow. He found one he liked, Justin Finch Fletchley, a second-year Hufflepuff Muggle-born, heading, he guessed, for the kitchens with a companion. Cyrus cast a disillusionment charm on himself so Justin wouldn't notice and slipped alongside them. Ernie, do you really think Harry Potter is the heir of Slytherin? Justin asked as they walked. I only found out about the Parseltongue thing yesterday. I'd say probably. Parseltongue's a dark wizard thing, Ernie said. He was terrifying when he spoke to that snake. Maybe, Justin said, and Cyrus moved in closer. He flicked his wand near Justin's temple and whispered the command word. Imperio. Justin's eyes glazed over as if he'd been hollowed out. He stopped, expression empty. What's wrong? Ernie asked. Nothing, Justin said in a monotone. I just remembered something. I need to go back. Get me a hot pumpkin juice, will you? Ernie didn't suspect a thing. Be careful, he said, watching Justin's odd manner. You told him you were Muggle-born, didn't you? I'll be careful, Justin replied, still under Cyrus's control. Cyrus led him down quieter passages, keeping an eye out for ghostly presences. In a dim corridor, he came across nearly headless Nick gliding along, his head slightly askew as usual. Cyrus lifted the Imperius on Justin and then let it go. Justin looked around, puzzled, then froze, his face draining of color. Why is this? How did I get here? Justin muttered, bewildered. How are you here? Nick asked, tilting what remained of his head. Did you walk here yourself? You're a Gryffindor ghost. What are you doing here? His voice had a melancholy lilt. I always show up when the new students arrive. Nick was interrupted by the sudden, absolute terror on Justin's face. The boy gave a strangled noise and collapsed, as if his courage had deserted him at the sight of a ghost. Nick blinked and looked genuinely confused. What? Am I that scary? I thought I only showed up to greet the newcomers. Cyrus watched Justin crumple to the flagstones, heart beating the steady rhythm that told him the plan was working. Panic would spread, attention would follow, and every small chaos might edge him closer to the opening he needed. He turned away and melted back into the shadows as the snow continued to fall. Justin was petrified, and nearly headless Nick was too. The idea that a terrifying attacker could strike even the dead sent shivers through everyone. Worse, Harry had once again been found at the scene and had been caught red-handed. Professor McGonagall was escorting him to Dumbledore's office. Cyrus bit into a piece of bread and pushed through the crowd, pretending not to notice the commotion. You've come just in time, Ginny. Ron cried when he saw her, relief flooding his face. From the way Ron and Hermione looked at her, it was obvious they expected Cyrus to have useful information. Did you go out with Harry? Did you find anything? Ron asked eagerly. No, I went straight to the Great Hall, Cyrus said. Ron visibly deflated. Hermione explained what Cyrus already knew. If we didn't know Harry, we might even think he was the culprit. Harry Potter is the heir of Slytherin, George. Fred scoffed, mock horrified, and George joined in. The most evil wizard in the world, Harry Potter, is a Gryffindor. Now we've really shown those Slytherins. They laughed. It's a pity it never happens that way by accident, otherwise we'd know who the real attacker is. The twins' joking planted an idea in Cyrus's mind. The Marauder's Map, an artifact that showed everyone's location in Hogwarts, would be perfect for finding the culprit. Fred and George couldn't keep it out all the time without risking exposure, but what if they happened to open it when the attacker struck again? Cyrus couldn't be sure events would follow the same script as before, and Dumbledore already suspected her. If she wanted any chance of getting out of Hogwarts safely, the map would be invaluable. Even just knowing where people were could give her an edge. She stepped over to the twins and pulled them aside. "What is it, Ginny?" Fred asked. "I always feel like she's up to something," George muttered. "I'm your sister. What could I be scheming?" Cyrus put on an innocent face. "How did I do last night? Didn't I give those Slytherins what they deserved?" "You did," Fred and George agreed, remembering the dueling club. "They won't hold their heads up for a while." "A whole year at least," George added. "As long as Ginny's at Hogwarts, they'll have it coming." "Since I did so well, can you do me a favor?" Cyrus asked, edging toward her request. The twins looked unconvinced. "You dealt with the Slytherins. What has that got to do with us?" Fred said. "Flint wanted to get back at you because of your hex." "Besides," George pointed out, "you did a lot of it for Ron's sake. You should be asking Ron for help." He glanced at Ron. "Do you really think Ron can help?" Both twins looked at Ron. It was hard to argue the point. "Okay, what help do you want?" they asked. "Do you remember how you saved me on my first day?" Cyrus lowered her voice. "Not the secret passages. That isn't what I mean. I mean your way of seeing people without being seen, knowing where they are. Maybe that can find the real attacker." "Our secret to success, huh?" George smirked. "Not surprised. You're not the first to think of it." "It's impossible, Ginny," Fred said. "Nobody knows when the air will strike. You can't watch the map forever." "We have to try," Cyrus insisted. "There have already been so many victims, and Harry's being blamed. We can't let the real culprit keep running wild. Give it to me, otherwise I'll tell Dumbledore." Fred and George feigned shock. "Did you hear that? Our good sister is threatening us." "I heard, Fred. My ears are fine," George said sadly. "If you don't want the professor to know, hurry up and take it out." "No," the twins answered in unison at first. They didn't give it up easily. Cyrus was baffled. "Why not? I'll give it back when I'm done." "No," Fred said firmly. "It's too dangerous, Ginny. We don't want to hear you've been petrified. Dumbledore said only someone skilled in the dark arts could cast that curse. And you're only a first year." The twins joked a lot, but they cared about their sister. "I'm tougher than both of you," Cyrus said, straight-faced. "And do you think I'm safe just because I embarrassed those Slytherins? If the hair's in Slytherin, he might hate me for that." "But you're pure blood," Fred hesitated. "Being pure blood doesn't mean you won't be a target," Cyrus said. "The message on the wall said, 'Enemies of the air, beware,' not 'Mudbloods, beware.' If I can see where people are ahead of time, I might be able to tell who's going to attack me." "That does make sense." The twins exchanged looks, then relented. "All right," George said after a pause. "Give it to her. We've pretty much figured out everything else." They led Cyrus out of the common room. The snow raged outside, and it was bitterly cold. Almost no one lingered. They found an empty classroom and locked the door. Fred produced a square of parchment from his robe with great ceremony. "Honestly, I'm going to miss it," he said. "I remember us as first years, young, carefree, full of mischief," George added. Cyrus laughed, more innocent than now, except for that run-in with Filch. "So Filch dragged us to his office and started his usual routine," Fred said. "We glanced at a filing drawer labeled Confiscated Items Highly Dangerous." "What did you do?" Fred asked. George grinned. "George threw a dung bomb to distract him while I opened the drawer and grabbed this. It didn't look that bad at the time," George said, "but Filch must have guessed, otherwise he wouldn't have confiscated it." "You know how to use it?" Cyrus asked. "Oh, yes." Fred tapped the parchment with his wand and said, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Lines of ink crept across the parchment like a web, filling it until green cursive appeared at the top. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids for magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's Map. Every corridor of Hogwarts and its grounds was mapped, and dozens of tiny black dots moved across it, each labeled with a name. It doesn't just show where everyone is, Fred said. It marks secret passages, too. We used one to get into Hogsmeade. We told you it was blocked because we didn't want you sneaking off alone. But honestly, you've proved yourself. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, George said, patting the map. Thanks to them. Noble fellows, working tirelessly to help a new generation of rule breakers, Fred intoned. And don't forget, erase it when you're done. Or everyone will be able to see it, George warned. Tap it and say, mischief managed, and it turns back into a blank piece of parchment. All right, little Ginny, Fred said in a mock Percy tone. You're on your own. Cyrus took the parchment with a solemn expression. Thank you. I'll return it when I'm done. Good news. I received a recommendation message. Bad news. I was fired from the company. Woo. Please give me some votes to comfort me. Chapter 40. Transform into Draco. After getting the Marauder's Map, Cyrus couldn't stop studying it. It had been a student-made prank, but its effect was surprisingly powerful. He sighed. Students were different in wartime. Look at what Hogwarts pupils were busy with now. Prefects, who were supposed to set an example, were sneaking around on dates and in the girls' lavatory of all places. He was talking about you, Percy. Cyrus stood at the entrance to the third-floor girls' lavatory, intending only to check on the progress of the polyjuice potion, when he saw a boy and a girl inside. His eyes narrowed. Ginny? Percy's face went crimson, and his hands sprang away from Penelope's arm as though he'd been shocked. What are you doing here? To use the lavatory, Ginny began, but Cyrus stepped forward, checked the sign to be sure he was in the girls' lavatory, and then turned back to the couple with an expression of bland disapproval. Dating in the girls' lavatory? I don't get it. Hogwarts doesn't forbid dating. Why are you sneaking around? He looked at Penelope. Penelope Clearwater, Ravenclaw prefect. Hello, Ginny. Penelope was as red as Percy, lips trembling. Hello, Miss Clearwater, she managed. Cyrus just wanted the pair to stay away from the third-floor lavatory for the time being. Listen, Ginny. Percy was recovering his composure and began. Could you please keep it a secret? Cyrus finished for him. The two of them nodded frantically. You know what George and Fred would do if they found out, Percy whispered, looking like he'd seen a boggart. They'd tell Mum and hang banners across the school. Fine, Cyrus said, but find somewhere else. Hiding in the girls' lavatory is ridiculous. Ron comes here a lot. If he finds out, half the school will know. Percy's face paled another shade. Thank you, Ginny. We'll, leave now. They fled like they'd been set on fire. Cyrus heard Percy grumbling to Penelope as they ran. I told you this place wasn't safe. We got spotted the first time. Then you find somewhere else, Penelope snapped, but it was lost as they hurried off. Ron barreled into the lavatory moments later, eyes darting around until he spotted Cyrus. What are you doing here? Did you see? Cyrus shrugged. I saw Percy and the Ravenclaw prefect. You weren't caught, were you? I was about to be, Ron said. But what's so strange about my being in the girls' lavatory? He added, more to himself than to anyone else, as long as the polyjuice potion's okay. Hermione pushed open the last cubicle's door and peered out from behind the cauldron. The potion inside was almost ready. Now we just need a bit of a Slytherin student's hair, she said. Goyles and crabs would be best. She looked at Harry and Ron. That's good, but what about you? Harry asked. I already have mine, Hermione said brightly, producing a tiny vial from her pocket and waggling a strand of hair inside. Remember when Millicent wrestled me in the dueling club? She left a bit of hair on my robes. She's gone home for Christmas. I'll tell the Slytherins I've decided to stay. I've got some too. Cyrus produced a few thin strands of hair of his own. Ron and Harry exchanged resigned looks and added the Slytherin hair to the potion. Hermes had stepped away to fetch clothes from the laundry room. The cauldron began to belch dark smoke, making the stalls hard to see through. Good thing Percy showed up when he did, Hermione muttered when she returned. If he'd come after the smoke started, we'd have been caught for sure. Hermione came back with 4 sets of clothes and 3 cups. She ladled the fizzing potion into them and dropped in Millicent's hair. The potion screamed like a boiling kettle and foamed until it churned into an ugly yellow. Ugh, Millicent Bulstrode's hair, Ron said, grimacing. That must taste disgusting. All right, add yours, Hermione said. Harry dropped Goyle's hair into the middle cup, and Ron dropped Crabbe's into the last. Each cup reacted loudly. Goyle's turned a muddy, tank-like yellow. Crabbe's went a dark, murky brown. Cyrus sprinkled his small pinch of white blonde hair into his cup. The potion shifted to a strange color, somewhere between black and white, but not gray. It looked wrong enough that Cyrus almost reconsidered drinking it. We shouldn't all drink in the same stall, Harry said. Once we're Crabbe and Goyle, there won't be room, and Millicent isn't small either. Good point. Ron agreed and opened the door. Let's each take a cubicle. Cyrus chose a slightly more private stall. He had had other ideas. Human transfiguration could do what Polyjuice did if you had a detailed understanding of the person you were copying: height, weight, build, facial features. He didn't have that depth of knowledge for Malfoy, but he'd decided on Malfoy weeks before. The night he'd stolen the potion, he'd also managed to pluck a handful of Draco Malfoy's hair. Tonight he would be Draco. He tilted his head back and drank. To his surprise, it wasn't unbearable. The taste was odd, sweet, bitter, a little sour, with a sharp edge of spice, but not repulsive. Once swallowed, the potion began to work. Something alive seemed to wriggle beneath his skin, surging and shifting. It felt like a snake coiling and sliding under his flesh, prying him apart at the seams. For a moment the pain was sharp, like tearing, and Cyrus gritted his teeth. Then it eased. When he looked down with his hands at his face, a curtain of platinum blonde bangs fell into his eyes. He blinked and raised his fingers to brush them aside, feeling the foreign texture of Malfoy's hair. The process was over.